Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and welcome to the British Council Seminar Series. Everyone here in the room and everyone joining online as well, welcome. I'd just like to say a special welcome to some of the people who are joining us from these countries: Saudi Arabia, Romania, Colombia, the United Arab Emirates, Italy, Mexico, Algeria, and of course the UK. It sounds like the Eurovision Song Contest, doesn't it? So I'd like to welcome everybody here in the room too. Thank you very much for having us back in Bournemouth. This is the third time we've been here. Just like to mention that there are 26 language schools accredited by the British Council in Bournemouth alone, and that's just the ones that are accredited. So it's a really vibrant town. You can see when you look around that there are lots of international students here, and this is all thanks to you teachers who are here in the room today. So thank you, and thanks for having us. So just to tell you a little bit about the British Council Seminar Series, we began the series in 2009, and we try to provide CPD for teachers in the UK, and also by streaming them online as well. It makes it accessible to people who may not be able to attend in person, and people around the world too. The feedback from the last seminar series has been instrumental in putting this seminar series together. There are 2 points that we picked up from the feedback. One was that people wanted practical sessions, so ideas you can take away immediately back to your classrooms. And the second thing is that more people wanted to attend online, and so we're doing that. As you can see, we're streaming today, so if you have any problem with being on film, then just come and see me or one of my colleagues at the end, and we'll make sure that you don't appear in the edit of the film. Then also, we also have 85 films available online. I'm not sure a lot of people know about this. So there are 85 films from the seminar since 2009. You can search them by tag. So we're in the process of them at the moment of giving them levels within the British Council CPD framework for teachers and managers. So that will be something coming out soon as well. Hopefully this seminar will give you lots of practical ideas to take back to use with your IELTS learners and students. And so without further ado, I hand over to Fiona Aish and Joe Tomlinson, who will introduce themselves. So I'll leave it up to them. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you very much for coming this evening. I'm Fiona and this is Joe. Our talk this evening is going to be about... where is it? Sorry. There we go. About preparing lower level students for IELTS, and I'm just going to give you a run through of what we're going to do this evening. So in a second Joe's going to do a short introduction about us, and then we're going to hand it over to you for a little discussion about the challenges of this topic, just to warm you up a little bit. We're then going to move on to talking about some of the general difficulties for lower levels, strategies to overcome these things that we've identified through some of our teaching and writing. And then the main part of the talk this evening is going to focus on tools and activities for each of the 4 papers working with students at lower levels. And then we will have questions at the end, if that's okay with you. Okay.
Okay, so just a little bit about us. We work for a company called Target English, which is largely a consultancy working with various universities and FE colleges in the UK, and we specialise in EAP and exam preparation. We also run something called Exam Ready, which is a diagnostic tool for IELTS. It diagnoses strengths, weaknesses, and gives a roadmap for improvement. And also, we've written 4 books for Collins, 3 on IELTS, Listening for IELTS, Grammar for IELTS, and Get Ready for IELTS Writing, which is a lower level book, and 1 EAP book, all about lectures. So that's really who we are and what we do. And now over to you. What we'd like you to do, just quickly with the person next to you, or if you're at home, just have a think of these questions to yourself, is just discuss these questions. So, do you teach IELTS firstly, and do you teach it to lower levels? What kind of levels do you teach? What challenges does it bring teaching IELTS to a lower level? And how in your classroom do you overcome them? So just 1 minute to the person next to you, please. Thank you.
I know the exam very well. I'm not teaching training now, but it's one of those exams where everyone's all after a slightly better score than what they did. Everyone's going to take something. I don't think it's slightly better. How do you teach it? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I can see you've got a lot to say about this. So just a quick show of hands. Who does teach IELTS to low-level students? Okay, excellent. And please keep your hand up, or put your hand up again, if there are any challenges that come with that. Okay, thank you very much. Well, there are a lot of challenges, and we want to share with you some of our own experiences of teaching IELTS to lower levels, and we've grouped some of the challenges that we think exist. And there are no shortage of challenges for this level. Firstly, language. Students, when I'm talking about low levels here, I'm really talking about kind of A2, B1. They don't have enough words, and they don't have enough grammar and language to tackle the papers successfully. So we really need to deal with that to make them perform effectively. One way in which we can do this is by embedding an awful lot of language, grammar practice, vocab, into the exam practice. And we're going to look at how we can do this. And when we talk about grammar practice, it's targeted specific grammar practice, because the grammar changes with the papers, and it's very different really from a general English kind of grammar syllabus you might have. So we're going to look at that briefly. The next one is test knowledge. For many students, especially with lower levels, but also the higher levels too, sometimes they see little meaning in the tasks they need to do. There's a disassociation towards them. For example, the writing task 1. They're not sure why they're doing it. They don't really know what it's about. They're not sure what they're being tested in for the reading. And if students don't know why they're doing it or how they're being tested, it can be very difficult for them. And I think it's up to us as teachers to try and provide meaning for each of those tasks, and really share with them, even at a lower level, the link between IELTS and EAP. So why they're doing that for the reading, why they're doing that for task 1, task 2, but give them meaning and bring those concepts to their level.
Okay, moving on to the other two areas that we've got here. The first one, motivation and level awareness. A lot of students at lower level are obviously very excited when they first start IELTS. For them, this is the beginning of the journey. The end point is often going to be university. But, of course, they're not really very well aware of their level. And often they're a little overconfident. And so trying to kind of get them to understand a little bit about where they are. Specifically, how much do they need to improve? They're not always aware of what is an IELTS 5.5 or 6 that they need to get to from where they are, and also how much time realistically is this going to take. This, of course, then has an impact on their motivation. Maybe they start off enthusiastically, and then as it dawns on them, this enormous mountain that they have before them, motivation levels can really plummet. And then, of course, this really affects a lot of the kinds of things they're doing in class, whether or not they're engaged or whether or not they switch off, the attention that they pay to kind of homework and all of these kinds of things. So one of the things that we've been working on a lot with our students and that we think is really important is diagnostic testing, so that they know right at the beginning of this journey where they're at, what are their strengths and weaknesses, and then this sort of feeding into goal setting, so that hopefully by setting small and incremental goals that possibly do focus on the things that Joe's mentioned before, then they can map out this improvement path a little bit more clearly, and hopefully by achieving some of these goals, then this maintains the motivation. We think that this is kind of much more important at the lower levels than possibly at the higher levels. And the final thing that we've got on the list is this test. Students really, really want to do practice tests over and over and over again. And at the lower levels, this can be really problematic because each time they're taking the test, they may not actually get the same results, especially in the reading and listening papers if there's a certain amount of guessing. So they can score, say, a 3 or a 4 or a 3.5, 4.5, and they can go up and down if they're keeping on doing these tests over and over again. Again, this can feed back into the motivation. So really what we're thinking and have been thinking with working with these students is really connecting improvement to actually working on language far more than just doing practice tests over and over again. And then this sort of feeds back into the beginning of the list, language again, which I think is quite key to a lot of these issues.
Yes. Okay. Now, we're going to look at some of these ideas in practice. We're going to look at each paper and some activities which kind of utilise the themes we've just talked about. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the receptive skills, and then Fiona's going to come back and talk about the productive skills. So, we're going to begin with listening. And some specific advice for the listening paper. Firstly, explore item construction. And this is something that we're going to look at next. Lower level students often have a desire to write the words they hear in listening. And we need to try and get them away from this and get them to start working at basic paraphrase. Basic paraphrase in the listening as well. So trying to remove them from just writing the words they hear, which, especially in terms of multiple choice questions, can be not the right thing to do, and move them into, as I said, basic paraphrase. And that is possible for this level. And I'm going to go through an activity next, showing you about that. The next part, in terms of motivation, students can create their own listenings. It takes time, and it needs to be scaffolded, structured, but it can be done. It's not a can of worms, it's creative. And it also gets them really working with their language and not just the keywords. It needs to be done in groups, it needs to be carefully monitored, but it does really get them focused. And the next thing is using graded listening material. We think this is quite important because if you're jumping into an IELTS, say, listening part 4, section 4, perhaps an A2 student is going to find that extremely difficult. So what can we do with that? Certainly the section 1s are more accessible to that level, But then there's also plenty of graded material out there that can be used as well. The next one, include the basics. Spelling tests. They're not a very popular thing, but these students need to be doing that. And they need to be knowing that if they spell a word incorrectly, they're not going to score for it. And I don't just mean spelling tests here with places, dates, times, but use the academic word list as well and get them learning the words, get them testing their spelling at those words, because they're the words they're going to encounter a lot of the time. And the last one, use noticing tools. Just ensure that they're asking themselves the key questions. So, for example, have they followed instructions? Are they following the correct form? Have they checked their spelling? And if you're giving them some kind of testing situation, you can keep asking these questions at the end, so they're checking, so then they begin to do it automatically. Obviously, give them some guidance in terms of what goes in spaces, nouns, verbs, etc. But most importantly, use the audio script. It's a really, really rich resource that has to be used in class at every level. I remember when I first started teaching IELTS, and often I would go through the answers, yes, right, wrong, but I'd never really explain why. That was my fault. I developed as a teacher and realised that it was my job to go through and explore why answers are right and why answers are wrong. And it can be extremely useful for the students as well. So, let's see how we can use this. Here we have a section 1 for the listening. And we're going to look specifically here at distractors in multiple choice questions. We've got the questions here and we've got the audio script. Can you guys see at the back okay? Yeah, excellent. Okay. Firstly, I'd like you just to read through it, try and find the answers. Don't worry, I'm not going to test you. Firstly, I'd like to point out that obviously we're not listening, we're reading. And we're doing this really to notice the language being used and to really explore it. So, we can see we've got city centre, that's A up there. We've got swimming pool and we've got tennis courts. However, they are not the answers. The answers aren't in the question. They're paraphrased. So, what can we notice from this? Well, we can point out to students, and we should, that on multiple choice questions, don't just listen to the words or the options that you've got on the paper. Your listening needs to be better than that. It's not in listening for keywords, it's listening for detail. The distractors, or the wrong options, are sometimes mentioned directly. The answer is often paraphrased. And this is a pattern, but it's a pattern that can be explored at a lower level as well. Because we can grade the questions, we can grade the material, but what we need to be thinking about is it's the language that's important, not those keywords. And I would say this is fine to explain and explore with students in their first language if you have a monolingual classroom. So, how can we use this information we've got? Well, firstly, we can explore correct and incorrect answers. As I said before, not just explain that things are right or wrong, but explain why they're right and wrong. We could use that kind of noticing tool as an introduction or as a follow-up activity. We can reinforce it by getting students to create this kind of distraction themselves, using more basic language they're used to, especially for a section 1. And for lower levels, we can carefully focus these activities around certain grammar and vocab to ensure they're practicing areas they're going to encounter in the exam. I'm going to quickly show you how this can be done. So, here we have the next question. The hotel is most popular with A, the elderly, B, families, C, business people. Obviously, what I'm going to show you now is just an outline. How you would do this kind of activity in class would very much depend on your class. But we've got this first question. We can start with brainstorming vocabulary around the options. So we've got over 65s, which we can match with the elderly, staying for work, people staying for work on business, parents and children, their families. So we can explore, brainstorm other options for that. And then we can also explore how to paraphrase that STEM, that first part. So here, we could choose, for example, an active-passive focus, because you might hear is most popular, is liked by, or people like blank. So this activity or this focus could be quite useful in terms of how we could paraphrase that. And this is, here would be where you would add that language focus in that we talked about at the beginning. So our language focus here is passive-active, which is very common in the exam. I think passive can be done at A2. I don't see a problem with that, especially because sometimes students really need a lot of reinforcement with subject, verb, object. It's crucial. And the more you can give them on sentence structure and the more you can do with that, the better they become at writing as well. And I think just having that passive to active takes that a step forward and gets them thinking about the subject, the object, the verb. We could also, depending on the students, think about introducing structures for distraction that they could use. So here I've just got a small example of that. Again, it's entirely up to you and your class and the question and the language you're using. But then once the scaffolding is in place, so looking at synonyms, looking at changing, paraphrasing that STEM, looking at how they can use the other words in distraction, and it could be a case of I can't swim, I can't play tennis, but I can, the answer, paraphrase. So you can use very basic language for this. But then once the scaffolding is in place, you can do a task with them where they choose a correct answer in a group, and they can choose any one they want for their group, and they have to write a listening, just one paragraph, where the correct answer is paraphrased, and they have to mention one of the incorrect answers directly, but it should be wrong in agreement to the STEM. Now, it probably seems like quite a difficult thing to do, but this is an entire class. This is 30 minutes worth of writing this and practicing the language and thinking about how they're going to do it. You could collect those answers in. As the teacher, your pronunciation is going to be the best. You can read them out. Then the groups can decide A is right, C is right for that one, B is right for that group. So they're actively listening, not just for those keywords, but for the language around it that gives them what the answer is. And I'm just briefly going to get you to try and think about how you do this yourself. So I'd like you to choose one of these answers as being correct, and then think about what you could write where you'd distract with one or two of the others. Just have a think about it very briefly. Okay, thank you. Well, I hope you get the idea of it. It's more enjoyable creating listenings and really thinking about the language rather than it being this incredibly passive activity. And if you'd like to talk more about, for example, how we use it, then feel free to come and speak to me afterwards or email us at home. I'm going to quickly move on to reading now. So some areas of focus for reading. Firstly, we must get students to read intensively, and there often tends to be too much focus on skimming and scanning. It's easy. Well, I say easy, it's easier to do skimming and scanning than it is to intensively read sometimes with students when we're practicing in large groups. So we're going to look at how they can intensively read, even at paragraph level. And this really can be done at every level. The next part we're going to be looking at is how to scaffold materials. And I think reading material tends to be, or should be, carefully selected. Sometimes it can have too much language and too much vocabulary for a lower level. So we're going to look at how you can just do it bit by intensively reading paragraphs. Students also need to know the question types and how they work, in which ways. And we can explore this like we just did in listening, but we can also do transformations with some questions. So look at how a true, false, not given could become another question type, if it can. So it's a conceptual thing, but it certainly can be done with lower levels. And again, noticing tools, incredibly important. So talking students through doing exams and giving them almost a commentary of what they should be doing. And a checklist. Are you writing your answers in the correct boxes? Check it. Go back, check your spelling. And again, to explore the answers. So why is it right? Why is it wrong? And for this, we're going to look at using language specifically to tackle reading. Now, this exercise looks at how we can intensively read and restrict the focus of the language somewhat. So here we're dealing with pronoun referencing. I'll give you a minute to read this again. So pronoun referencing is incredibly important throughout the exam. As Edward de Chazal, who is here, talked about, the words such as moreover, however, they're not incredibly common throughout IELTS. Sometimes you see a lot of them in the writing, but you don't often see them in the reading. You see all these pronouns come up, and they're linking, they're cohesive with their pronouns. So we're going to look at how we can use these and practice language from this. So, firstly, this is quite a high-level one. You may wish to grade the language. I've only graded this slightly. I think I've taken out a few adverbs, etc., things that aren't really key to the exercise. But it's quite useful to show students ones where this is it with all the language. Here it's simplified, but you can still answer the questions. You don't need to know every word. Yeah? So firstly, we can ask what the underlined sections refer to, so some form of guided discovery. So, for example, we've got they. We can say, is food they? Hopefully they say no. Is obesity they? Supermarkets they. Supermarkets they. We could have causes, but causes don't provide food. Supermarkets provide food. So we can start by just asking questions about the underlined words. We've got in number 3 here, these issues. What other word can be used for issues? Challenges. Problems, excellent. And we can go back and see where the problems are and then link with that, okay? So we know that these issues are obesity and healthcare problems. So we're making that link there. We can do this just slowly by guiding the students. And then we can get students to complete these after we've helped them identify what the pronouns actually refer to. And getting them to write the whole sentences like this gets them to connect the ideas together. So, now we've done this, we can give them some kind of IELTS-styled text based around these pronouns we've worked with. And this is just a very brief summary completion here. So here we can look at the same pronouns. So what, who lowered the price? The supermarkets. And by giving them those building blocks, it then helps them to answer an IELTS-style activity and confidence build better. Because here we've done it using pronouns, identifying the noun. And it's very common, well, not very common, but it sometimes happens that in the question paper of a reading, you will have one sentence and the answer embedded in the text will go over 2 or 3 sentences. And there's referencing within this. So it's bringing the ideas and connecting them together for the students firstly, and then getting them to practice this, okay? It can be done in many different ways. Again, do feel free to come and talk to Fiona and I. You may not feel comfortable doing this kind of thing yourself, in which case you can start with the exercise if you can see the language and then work back from it. Now I'm going to hand over Fiona to talk to you about writing and speaking.
Okay, so I'm going to use the same kind of format. Same format. I'm going to use the same format as Joe, go through some of the tools, and then we're going to look at some activities for writing and speaking. So, first of all, going through to look at task 1, just so that everyone's clear. Task 1 is the graph or pie chart or some form of visual information that students have to describe the main trends and features of in 150 words. And one of the main problems here is that students are often very unfamiliar with information presented in this kind of format, especially if they're young. They don't really understand why someone puts information into a graph or a bar chart, who uses this kind of stuff. And because they haven't been to university yet, they're also not really aware that the majority of academic subjects use a lot of graphs and charts to present information, or at least to summarise and this kind of thing. So it's very important to, we think, to kind of get them into this idea of understanding kind of why it's like it is, and giving them sort of meaningful practice whereby, for example, they could make their own graphs, or they understand the context in which this kind of information might appear. Obviously, then we need to do some focus on language, and there's some key things that go into the writing task 1, things like tense, whether or not it's presenting information from the past to the present, or just in the present, or includes any prediction into the future. Subject, verb, object, and sentence structure is key to this. At lower levels, if students are let loose with an IELTS Task 1 without really being forced into following word order, then all sorts of mangling can happen, and it becomes quite incomprehensible quite quickly. Things like prepositions, where they don't really understand the impact of a change in preposition and the difference in meaning. So if something increases to 10% or increases by 10%, then they're at risk of misunderstanding or misrepresenting the information in their writing. So you need to do a lot of focus in those kinds of areas. And really, when you've got them to kind of understand the concept of the visual information, giving them these language tools, then really getting them to write and rewrite over and over and over again. There's no harm in getting them to rewrite their homework 2 or 3 times, really noticing the small things each time they do it, improving their accuracy. Getting them to notice something like, we've got this graph here, now let's put it in the past. What are you going to need to change throughout the writing here in order to get them to notice some of these things? And then also feedback in Task 1 is really, really important, to spend quite a lot of time highlighting features to students of things that they need to work specifically on, possibly grouping things, doing a long feedback. We spend a lot of time with students writing, going through what's right, what's wrong, what's right, every word, sentence, etc., so that they can see that the accuracy that's required, but just building up their confidence that they can do this kind of thing. Looking at Task 2, it's an altogether different proposition. Of course, this is the one where they have to write a discursive essay on a social topic, usually something like the environment or health or the media, in 250 words. And the main issue here with a lot of students, not just lower levels, but definitely at lower levels, is that they tend to write about the topic and not answer the question. Okay, so you might get something like where a question says, in the future, everyone will use English for business. How much do you agree or disagree with this statement? And they write about why it's important to learn English and not actually answer the question. And so this is one of the things that's really worth kind of spending a lot of time with students identifying. Does the question mean this? Will you include this kind of information? Will you not? So that they don't start furiously writing and going off on a tangent. There's a lot of other grammar that can be incorporated into teaching Task 2. It's very different from Task 1, and this needs to be highlighted. It does look, some of it, such as modals, looks like it might be quite high level, but as Joe was saying with the passive, you can still work with students on a lower level here. One of the things they tend to do a lot is factualize everything. Everything is or will be, instead of being may, might, or could. And so they can work at changing those kinds of sentences. And also basic noun phrases, things like the problem of global warming is possible. It's still possible to teach them very simple basic noun phrases. They will need quite a lot of subject-specific vocabulary and things like that, and collocations. You notice that the vocabulary appears much more here than in the first task, and we're going to talk a bit about that in a minute. And then a lot of it is kind of similar to what Joe's been saying about the reading, working much more at paragraph level rather than at whole essays, getting kind of things where they can write a topic sentence, and then a reason, and then an example. Even 3 or 4 sentence paragraphs, nothing more, but keeping them scaffolded and guiding them through this process. Again, with using checklists is very useful. Here they can do quite a lot of self-editing. You know, have you got a topic sentence, and have you got these vocabulary words that we've been looking at? Are these incorporated in your essay? And they can do this in groups as well. Students often like criticising each other's work, pointing out the bad things. And so there's lots of possibilities there. Slightly different. We kind of think that the feedback here in Task 1 needs to be much more teacher driven because of the accuracy that's required. Okay, so we are now going to move on to looking at some activities. I'm going to focus on task 1 because Sam is going to be talking about task 2 quite a lot later. And we're going to look at a sort of a decoding writing task 1, guiding students through understanding something that they may not really be able to understand at face value. You're going to have to do a bit of work now. So with the person next to you, I would like you to look at the 4 lines here. We're imagining that the students already know, or you know, how to say increase, decrease, or go up, go down. And can you describe what each of the coloured lines are doing? Okay, okay. Thank you. Are we done? Okay, everybody. Thank you. So hopefully you can see a few similarities, maybe between the blue and the green are a little bit similar here. Not much is happening to the purple one. The red one's making the most difference. We're just focusing on the movement. Now, if we add in some actual graph information, what's the numbers on the bottom on the x-axis? Years. What are the numbers on the y-axis? We don't know. Good answer. But obviously now we can start to add more information. So we can describe where the green line starts at 10 in this date and where it finishes. Okay? So we can layer this on. We still don't know what any of this information is about. Now this, I want you to put yourself in the mind of a low-level student who doesn't understand the vocabulary. These are made-up words down here. And this is essentially what a lot of our students see. Yeah? Now, even though, I don't know about you, but even though I kind of can work out probably how these things relate to each other, I'm still getting a bit confused by these words. It's still clouding my thinking of this information because I don't know what these words are. And this is what's happening to students a lot, and we need to kind of work with them to get them to try and understand the graph more without paying attention to the words they don't know. If they're in the real exam and this happens, then there's nothing they can do. So they need tools to kind of circumvent this problem. Oops. So we've got some questions around here. So the first question, what tense is needed? The past, hopefully. Good. Does the percentage refer to Doblists or Juchfonthoschens? Doblists, we've got it in the title here. Good. The words on the right, are they Doblists or Juchfonthoschens? How do we know? Yes, somebody spotted. There are 4 of them in the title. Okay. What pronoun can we use for Doblists? We could use they. Why? How do we know this? There's an S on the end. Good. And do people or things visit? Usually people. And what do they visit? Places. Okay. So we still don't know what these 2 words mean, but we can summarise the information essentially as some percentage of a group or type of people visited 4 different places between 1980 and 2010. Okay. And that is essentially what the graph is explaining to us, these changes over time. Okay? Realistically, we don't need to know these words here in order to be able to explain the graph. The students can just slot these words in every time they're describing the information. Okay? And considering this is what they see in a textbook or an exam, this is quite daunting compared to what we've just done, which has given them quite a lot of confidence to then start tackling this. Okay? I mean, further things that we can do, once you've sort of trained them into using these kinds of techniques, then you can start sort of discussing what kinds of people use this kind of information. Who would the DOB lists likely to be? You know, they could be school children visiting shops. They could be, as in this case, tourists visiting countries. They could be shoppers visiting websites. They could be many different things. And so then they get the idea that if they get a percentage of something with an S visiting something, they've already got this picture of how they can tackle this kind of task. And it's just a useful thing to, again, work with the awareness and motivation, and then we can start layering on the language that's required to obviously complete the task. That's another matter. Okay, so we're going to move on now to looking at the speaking section. And in terms of this tools for speaking, excuse me, it's important here to ensure the students understand the focus of each part. Just to recap, the first part, they answer some general questions. The second part of the speaking test, they have a card where they have to speak for 1 to 2 minutes on a particular topic, and they have to include certain points. And then in the third part, the examiner asks them some more abstract or conceptual questions based on this topic. And there's various things that can be incorporated into each of that part from a language point of view. But we think it's quite important in this area to go through with students the marking assessment criteria. It's far more easy to understand how you're being graded on your speaking than the writing. The writing marking criteria includes cohesion and coherence and these kinds of things that are very difficult for students to understand. But things like pronunciation and vocabulary, range of grammar, accuracy, how many different words did you use and how much grammar did you get right, is kind of quite simple. And so working with that, obviously, the IELTS provides the public version, so you can find those online, and even maybe getting students to translate them for each other if they're good enough. But this is useful. Then also looking at providing the building blocks. This is very much a focus on the language areas. And we work a lot with lower level students with kind of sentence frames or substitutions, where you have these little phrases where you can slot in different vocabulary items or different topics. So my main reason for studying English is to go to university. My main reason for coming to this class is because I like my teacher, many different things. In my family, there are 5 people. In my town, there is a supermarket. Lots and lots of things where they're providing the basic grammar for students where it's all correct, and they can fill in the spaces and feel like they're actually using a lot more vocabulary. Linking words, basic linking words, just the and, but, so, and because, to enable them to expand on their answers. A lot of IELTS examiners say that the students don't expand enough, especially in the first part. And then when we've got these kind of building blocks and a better understanding of the task, again focusing on the recycling and repeating the activities over and over again. And then also using noticing tools such as model answers, and getting students to record themselves. Almost all of them have got mobile phones with the ability to record themselves, and they can build up their own little library and compare themselves to good models and then assess their own spoken output, possibly if they are good enough against the criteria or against your simplified version of the criteria. And I just want to look at a couple of activities that look at this. I've taken this from one of the Collins lower level speaking books. And this is a nice couple of activities here focusing on language and replacing language. So in the exercise, the students match up the meanings, first of all, and then with the underlined words, they can work out which ones they can replace. Then obviously they can go on to add lots more to these lists so that they're sort of building up not only very simple, it's near, it's got, it is, or it's famous for, many different kind of stems, and then they've got a range of things that they can tack on the end, and again, improving their ability to be flexible with the language they've got, and actually add to it quite easily. The next activity, I'll just give you a little bit of time to read exercise 3. So in this one, they put the sentences or parts of sentences A to F in the correct places in the text, and then they listen to the delightful Stephen, which we will do now, hopefully.
Track 13.
Last year, I travelled to Rio and visited my cousin and his family. My best friend went too. We went to my cousin's house and we had a delicious traditional meal. After we ate dinner, we walked to the city centre. When we saw the carnival, it was very exciting. We danced and sang. We watched the parade. It was fun, but we were very tired. Then we visited another city and stayed at a famous hotel, but it wasn't very nice. We stayed for 2 days, then we went home. It was a special trip for me because I travelled without my parents for the first time.
So the model answer is very clear, very simple. It's not really using language that is much above an A2 level. And this kind of thing you can then use to get students to think a little bit more about the prompt in the task 2, the part 2. What, if this was an answer to a part 2, what would it say on the prompt? Possibly something like, describe somewhere that you visited, say where you went, what you did, who you went with, and why it was important for you. And then students can see it's actually quite simple to do this kind of thing. And the model answer, as I said, the pronunciation and the delivery is very clear, so they get the opportunity to understand that. You can then move on to do a follow-up exercise like this one, where it's consolidating the meaning of the connecting words, and then, of course, they can do their own, read it to their partner, make up the prompt, etc., etc., and again, you can be quite creative with this, but they've got a nice little model that's easy to follow and hopefully shouldn't be too challenging for them. And then obviously you can take out the vocabulary and recycle that over and over again, or recycle the activity over and over again. Instead of it being a place that they visited, it could be something like a festival that they went to, a party that they went to, etc., etc., where a lot of the parts of the prompt end up actually being very similar, and they can follow the same structure. So really, the idea of these kinds of activities are obviously to build the confidence, the language, and the fluency, and hopefully allowing students to see their progress and to stay motivated. So that's the end of the section about the different tasks. So essentially, in the summary, what we really wanted to focus on was showing you some kinds of activities and tools and things that can address the first 4 categories that we were talking about at the beginning, and we hope that you found them useful.
Yeah, really a lot of the receptive exercises were about really fitting in language practice to IELTS, because it needs to be done. If they're doing general English with IELTS on top, they need to know the specific grammar they need for those papers, I think. So giving them practice with IELTS is quite useful. And obviously giving them some form of meaningful item practice. Something we do with task 1, because it is difficult for writing, is get them to kind of role play it. Imagine they have a very busy manager. They've got to get the data out. They've got to summarise it in a sentence. Their manager's going to be furious if they just describe all the facts, all the figures. Their time is precious. So get them to do these kinds of things in order for them to really understand that it's about the trends, the summary. What do they need to communicate with that? I think that's it.
I think so.
Okay. So really, the last thing to say is thank you very much for listening. If you'd like the slides, or if you've got any questions, and also we do have a grammar list for each paper, and if you'd like that, please just send us an email and we'll send it on to you. Have we got time for questions?
Yeah, I don't know.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona and Joe. That was wonderful. Great to be put in the position of a student there for a second. Really kind of jarring experience. So we do have time for maybe one question from the room and one from. Oh no, we don't have many questions from the online at the moment. Okay, if you're watching online, then please do send in your questions using the hashtag BC Seminars on Twitter. Sorry, I forgot to mention that at the beginning. So if you have any during the break, then please send them in and we can pass them on to Joe and Fiona. Do we have any questions in the room? Okay, here we go.
Right, one of the problems I have with students, especially for the longer speaking, is that they often don't have experience to draw from when answering a task, and then they don't know what to do. Is there a particular strategy that you recommend for that?
Well, one of the things is they can always put themselves in somebody else's position. A lot of students think that they have to tell the truth sometimes in this, and I often say, when talking about things, I put myself in the mind of my father, because he's got quite a lot to say about things. Sorry if you're watching. But thinking of another person's activities, often they can think of their cousin or their friend or their sister and their brother. What did they do? And telling somebody else's story or somebody else's information sometimes also is easier, because it's less kind of personal. That would be one suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much once again, Fiona and Joe. We're going to take a short 10-minute break now, so people in the room, if you'd like to go and grab yourselves a drink, then great. And people at home, we will be back in 10 minutes' time, so if you'd like to tweet any questions or comments, then please do. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
very pleased to welcome back to the seminar series Sam McCarter. We've had many seminars with Sam all around the UK, and they're all available to watch on English Agenda. So if you'd like this and you'd like to watch some more, then please go ahead and have a look there. So just to tell you a little bit about Sam, he's been teaching IELTS since November 1995, and he's recently, along with Edward de Chazal, who's in the audience today, has won the English Speaking Union President's Choice Award for Innovation and Technology in Language Teaching, and that's for the IELTS Skills app, which is available to download from the Macmillan website and iTunes and Google Play. So congratulations to Sam and Edward.
No, he's different.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, well, congratulations, Edward, too. That's great.
Not him, me.
Sorry, Sam, and congratulations.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, so without further ado, over to you, Sam. Thank you.
Okay, right. Well, thank you for coming in a rather inhospitable evening. I'm just going to say a few things about myself. I've been teaching IELTS for 19 years. It probably shows. And I must say I've enjoyed it, otherwise I wouldn't have stayed with it. I have to do it because I teach overseas doctors, dentists and nurses, and I teach from my living room in central London to a hospital which is connected with Manchester University and the local care trust. And I do that on a Wednesday morning and a Friday afternoon. The beauty of doing video conferencing from a living room, I don't have to brush my hair, but I have to make sure that the carpet is clean because the camera is very, very sophisticated. Now, I'm used to jumping around and moving up and down, but I have to stand still because of the filming. So if I look as if I'm twitching, it's not the alcohol I've drunk, because I haven't drunk any. It's the fact that I'm wanting to move around. I'm just used to moving. I'm an active teacher, not a sitting down. Video conferencing is quite difficult for me because I have to stay put. What I'm going to be talking about is this. Is creativity possible, desirable, and or necessary in the IELTS classroom? And I'm focusing on task 2. Now you might think that creativity, IELTS, task 2, is that an oxymoron? Is it possible? Is he mad? When I put this forward, we were talking about doing a blog, which is going up related to this. I had questions about, is it possible to be creative? Is it not dangerous? Well, I think the issue is that we need to be creative, and creative in a way that I'm thinking about it. I think it is possible, desirable, and necessary, but it's the process that we have to be thinking about. So I'm only going to be talking about task 2. I'm not looking at grammar. I'm only focusing on creating ideas. And I'm going to look at what is creativity very briefly, and then look at the barriers that you and I face, because I'm still teaching. I'm just one of these, I have to teach in order to continue writing. And then I'm going to look at some techniques that we can take away. And at the end, I've produced a short checklist for students and for teachers for creativity. You can add to it, because I don't think the problem with creativity is not just the students, it's us. And I include myself in that. I don't say this is a general thing. So what is creativity? I'm going to give you 4 quotes, just very quickly. Anybody recognize, think where they might come from? This one? Anybody? Sorry? No, it's, well, you're I think probably in the right area. It's Van Gogh. Yes? Who's this? Anybody with children? Brilliant, Dr. Seuss. Yes. It's quite nice, isn't it? But look at what about this one? Who might this be? Think technology. Sorry? Steve Jobs. And what I like about this is connecting things. And I think this is what we need to do in the classroom, is connecting things, connecting ideas, connecting concepts. And what about this one, which I like even more? Einstein. And I think that is very clever, because I think what we need to do is infect the students and infect them with getting ideas to plant the processes rather than plant just the ideas. So this is what I wrote for part of the blog. It's being edited. I did this first before I looked up the quotes. And it's, hopefully, it's the synthesis, the Bloom's taxonomy. Yes? Thinking of something new and creativity in the widest sense. So what I did for myself was I wrote a list of words that I thought would help with creativity. And basically, to me, creativity is a process. And it is about all of these things. It's about spontaneity. It's about connecting. And to me, this is the main thing. I personally believe with my students that the difficulty is that it's not the fact that they don't have the ideas, it's they don't know how to connect them. They don't know how to connect the world outside themselves into the IELTS classroom because they are bogged down with a whole host of things. And it's the connecting and the questioning and the transferring of this across all 4 skills. In IELTS, you have 4 score bands and a global score band. Why? It's the same thing being tested in each of the 4 major skills. So if students are good at reading, are they going to be good at writing? We have the jagged profile, because quite often students don't know how to transfer. The information quite often is there. They've got processes in one, but can't transfer it to the other. And I think it is our job as teachers to help them do this. And this is creating for them systems and so that they can manipulate them and change. And it may seem very strange to put straitjacket and freedom together. But if you think about it, I'm a course writer. I've written quite a few books, and quite often I'm given a specific number of words to put onto a page. And those of you who have done this know what I'm talking about. And I have to maybe summarize endless books at about 250 words. So I've got a straitjacket. And that straitjacket actually gives me freedom. And somebody said this to me years ago when I started writing, and I thought, is this correct? And the tighter I make the straitjacket, the freer I feel myself. And this is our straitjacket. This is the straitjacket within which we operate in IELTS. And Fiona and Joe mentioned the fact that IELTS is the same sorts of elements that are in EAP. So therefore we need to be able to teach our students this system. This is our system. This is actually the dark matter in the universe. And there's 86% of dark matter in the universe, 14% is visible. And we talk about, in our classrooms, we talk about the visible things, and students think, well, why are we doing this? Why is this teacher wittering on about cause and effect and classification and helping us to analyse various questions in the exam and in our writing? Why are we writing topic sentences? Why do we have reasons? Why do we compare and contrast? Why are the essays about problem solution? Well, because the world that they're going into demands this. And this is all around us. Now, there are more than these. I think Edward was saying to me earlier that he's written 36. And he and I called them essential features, essential elements in a book that we did. But it's all the way through EAP. and IELTS. If you want a bit more on this, look at, this is about reading, but it's Cyril Weir in the IELTS research reports, number 9, where he talks about this in the context of reading. And the beginning is very readable, so it's a way of getting you into thinking about what all of this means in the IELTS context. So, what are the barriers? What I'd like you to do for a minute is to talk to your partner and a minute only because we don't have much time, and say what you think are the main barriers for your students in creating ideas in task 2, and you might even extend that to IELTS part 3, speaking part 3. So what do you think for you are the barriers? You can talk to yourself. You can talk to yourself. Okay. Could we just have people shouting out their what they think? Just, you know, words or phrases. Anybody?
Lack of life experience.
Lack of life experience. Yes, major one.
Culture.
Culture.
L1 experience.
Yes.
Not being familiar with the subject.
Yes.
Slavish addiction to the format of the exam.
Brilliant. Yes. I think that's quite, quite general. I quite often get asked, how do I get my students to come up with ideas? And they're talking about teenagers and even adults, and I say to them, I have the same problem, and I'm teaching postgraduate medics. And somebody's sitting in front of me, he teaches with me, and she's nodding. And we're talking about, the top percentage in the population. I think it's goes beyond just culture. It's a galaxy of things, and I actually think people have ideas, and I think part of the problem is that students put themselves into certain categories. We test them and put them into a band 6. We test them and put them into a band 7, yes? And a lot of students that I have fluctuate around the band 6. They are like little atoms floating around band 6, and now and again they just suddenly break through the barrier and go into band 7. They hate it and they run back in again. Because band 7, to paraphrase Hartley probably, is a foreign country. I feel safer at a 6. And they're quite comfortable, and they sit at a 6. I actually don't necessarily believe in fossilization. I'm anti-fossilization. I think that you can change people. I've got some of my students once said to me the other day, "Oh, Sam, I'm pleased I've moved from fine in my writing task to very good," and he was ecstatic, and he was really, really chuffed about it. I've had people who have really started at band 5 and are now writing at 8+. My problem is my students need 4 7s. I have students in the class getting 8.5, 8, 7.5 and 6.5. You can imagine how soul destroying that is. So I think we ourselves are in danger of categorizing students and putting them into band 6 and sometimes reinforcing this and making them stay there. I think we need to challenge them. Creativity is not about the students only, it's about our methodology and our way of challenging the students and challenging ourselves. I can't, my students can't. When I started teaching, I remember someone saying to me, oh, my students can't do that. I said, mine can't, and they're a lower level than yours. They can produce. I have the confidence to make them produce, yes? So I don't see barriers. That is an issue. And I think, to me, the second one is very central to what I believe and what I do, is students have the lack of ability to navigate ideas. We need to teach them the system within which they can operate, the text features, the text elements that I was talking about, and then build that up gradually to make them feel comfortable so they will bounce in and out of that system. And I'm going to look at some techniques in a minute to do that. This one, exam backwash, is what you're essentially talking about. The fact that students in the exam, all they will do is exam practice. And, you know, when students have done the exam 10 times and failed in inverted commas, they haven't got achieved the right grade, then that is a major issue. And we must get out of that in the way we teach the class, finding strategies to overcome just doing exam practice. The exam treadmill, effectively the same thing, doing the exam again and again. And certificate acquisition syndrome. The idea, oh, I need to have this. I've had students come and present me with 10 sheafs of paper, and they are all past exams. And they're going up and down, up and down. And it becomes a treadmill the students find it impossible to get out of. We need to shake the students up a bit. The other thing is class sizes. I've taught 30 in a class. Now I've got the luxury of invited classes where maximum 8, 9 in video conferencing from my living room. Weekend maybe maximum 18, 19. I was in a conference last year before I think it was, and a young teacher came up to me and said, Sam, I want your advice about how to teach large classes. I teach a class with 1,000 students at a time. What can I do? And I just burst out laughing. I said, you tell me. I don't know if I can count to 1,000, let alone. And she said, oh, we break up into small groups of 50. Well, that tells you why people can't necessarily do that. I'll not name the university in Italy where that is. And the other thing is time constraints. I say things and people say, well, I've only got 16 hours to teach them, get them from band 4 to band 7. I've 16 hours to do, 25 hours to do that. And everything that I say has to be adapted according to the students that you have, and possibly what your institutions demand, because institutions and parents and the students themselves demand certain things. However, a time constraint is very, very useful, as we'll see in a second. Courses, course length, exam ignorance. And I mean exam ignorance. I don't mean knowing the items in the exam. I mean the essential elements that are being tested in each of the sections. The students need to know this, because otherwise how can they navigate the writing, reading, listening, or whatever. And experience, the over-experienced student who's experienced in failing. I used failure as a criteria for entry to a course that I set up years ago. It's still going, run by a colleague of mine, and students had to fail to get into the course. But it meant they were highly motivated. And I put sometimes my inexperienced teachers in because they trained the teachers. Students often know more about the exam than what we do, and that is how I have built up my experience. The exam is high stakes, creates a lot of pressure, and that is why students then... I have a student who said to me the other day, he's extremely good, he's getting 8s and 7s, but getting a 6, 6.5 sometimes. And he said, oh, I want to get a 9 in listening. And what is happening then is when he gets into the reading, he's exhausted. And yet in the class, he's an 8, 7, 8. So he was hopefully changed his attitude. Student wants versus students' needs. They have ideas about what they want. We have ideas about what they need. And we then have to try and translate that. And students also, beyond the wants, they have expectations from you and me. But also students' family. If you've got an adult, they have to, maybe the breadwinner, they have to get through because they have to go into work to support the family, wherever. So these things are going on. Professional background. Coming to the IELTS from memory, and this is very dangerous for task 2. I would say that back in the late 90s it was possible for students to learn particular questions because the questions were quite limited and then regurgitate in the exam. And I've had a couple of students who, because I teach medics, they have done the exam, passed the IELTS, got through, failed the medicine, had to come back again and take the IELTS, but they couldn't get through because the exam changed. They needed 4 7s, and the exam has become more flexible over the years. Now students can't just do the exam based on memory. They have to be incredibly flexible and change what they are, the way they're doing things. So we must get over the memory focus, and we have to, I think, get over sometimes our assumptions about different types of students, and maybe try and challenge fossilization, our fossilization, and students' fossilization. Techniques, and this is where we're going to hopefully give some ideas. Constantly breaking barriers, doing things differently, getting students to move around. I wonder if you come to conferences, do you always sit in the same place in a conference? Do you sit on the left, in the middle, at the back? Do your students sit in particular seats in classrooms? Do they rush in to get into a particular seat and they won't move? I say to my students, change your seat, you'll pass the exam. And then they start moving around. I get confused because I've forgotten, I look over here and they're sitting over here. But it's a good way of getting the classroom moving. Ask our students how we should do it. They'll come up sometimes with crazy ideas, but sometimes they work. For writing task 2, there are no visuals, obviously. But sometimes getting students starting to think about things, give them random pictures, even obliquely connected with a writing task that you have given them, and get them to somehow try and connect it, to trigger ideas. It's about triggering and using various triggers and stimuli to get things going. And now something very specific. Word association. I'm going to use the word technology because I've got it in the exercises after this. If students are doing a writing task 2 on technology, and I've chosen technology because all students will know something about technology, and the younger ones definitely will know about technology. We, I think, sometimes are guilty of saying to students, oh, can you come up with ideas, or create ideas, or generate ideas? And the problem with ideas for students who are not used to creating ideas is that they're usually phrases or sentences. And I think it's a good idea to start with words. Technology. What words do you associate with technology? And doing that, even a list without thinking. Could we just try this now? I just want you 30 seconds to anything. What do you think of the technology? Don't write them, do it with your partner. You have 30 seconds. Okay, 30 seconds is up. I don't want to know the words, but did you get more than one word? Anybody more than 2 words? 5 words? 10 words? You'll pass the IELTS. You don't need 10, you only need 3. And this is the issue. And everybody can do it. And you can, it's a very simple technique for narrative, for anything. Then you can then build on that when your students more comfortable. Phrase association. The role of technology, give me a few phrases and get them to give 2 or 3. You notice that I said to you 30 seconds. Why? Because I created a straitjacket. Students, if you say, do this, say, oh, I can't do this, oh, I don't know this. Just say 30 seconds. It's not you speaking, it's time. And that restriction gets the brain going. I write, and I write every day, and sometimes I'm quite obsessive about things, and when it comes to writing, I could spend 10 hours and I wouldn't notice the time had gone. Now, I say to myself, you have 15 minutes, type close, and I go and do in 15 minutes now what I did about in the past would take me a month. And it's incremental. So time is a very good straitjacket. Getting students, you can give students a whole galaxy of words and say, oh, draw a line connecting these ideas. Again, back to the universe, connecting, using the dark matter to connect what is known. We give them the known and get them to make the links. Paraphrasing, a big part of IELTS. And I sometimes give students texts, and I get them just sentences connected, their juxtaposition, there are no connections, I get them to connect. And then they have to then insert synonyms, and they have to paraphrase using the various structures in order to turn a band 6 into a band 7. And it's quite interesting because it's very safe. They have the information, and you can even take that a step further and just giving students to substitute words, substitute phrases, placing things on top. It's getting them starting to think about things. You can mix visuals, words and phrases, give them even a chart before you do the writing task too, and get them to come up with reasons why the visual, what it relates to in the real world. And then chains. Now, I'm using the word function here in a very broad sense. We have functions like cause, effect, example, etc. And get students to maybe take a word like technology, and what is the effect? 30 seconds, tell me some effects of technology with your partner. How many can you come up with in 30 seconds? Okay, stop. Can somebody give me their effects, 2 or 3 or maybe more? You might have up to 10, 20, I don't know. Anybody give me their effects? Stress. Very good one, yes.
Gratification.
Gratification. I won't go into that one, but anyway, it's a good one. Anything else?
Greater communication.
Yes.
Wasting time.
Yes. And then you can start categorizing them into positive and negative, yes. Okay. I'm going to do one more from here. We don't often do this one. Get students to give the purpose of technology. Why do they use technology? And it's also connected with reasons. Again, 30 seconds. What purpose? Begin with 2. Okay, can you stop? If I say purpose, is it positive or negative? Positive. So we can't say to give you stress. That's not the purpose of it. Well, it might be, the government might be doing that, your manager might be doing that, but for us, no. Some examples? To communicate, it's the same thing. Yes? So really all the positive things you said to me, then we can start organizing and creating a mosaic. We can enrich the language. We can change from because to, in order to, so that, so. And we can start working in that. You could give students a list of purposes to do this, to 5 of them, and say, okay, I want you to insert some of these in your speaking before we do your writing, but I want you to transform it using so, so that, etc. So you're getting this movement. I'm not going to go into the others, we won't have time. And getting students to see sequences. You think about it, the world we live in is past, present, and future. The past can be related to the cause of something. The present is the effect of something. And the future is maybe to connect it with solutions as we try and sort out problems. So, cause, effect, problem, solution. And with my students, etiology, cause, illness and prognosis. And they do this all the time, but they have not made the transfer from their background, their medical background, into what is going on in the real world. So we can look at consequences, but it's making connections and, in the true sense of the word, creating collisions, creating situations where ideas collide. Now what I want you to do is, this is another exercise, I've just made a list of these, you can, on this slide and the next, what I want you to do is maybe choose one from here, and what I want you to do is to see what is the link between technology and growth. And the reason why I've done this, do this a lot with my students, that I was quite shocked one day when I made a connection between 2 ideas, and I realized, the students said, well, how are they connected? And I thought, they were thinking vertically about the 2 things, technology and growth, but could not see how they could be linked in some way. And then I asked another student, and they gave a link, and they said, yes, but the same thing happened 3 times in the lesson. And it suddenly struck me, they cannot see what they know. They know these things, but they're not activating links and associations. And these links and associations might not be cause and effect links. They might be classification links. They may be just the fact that they are juxtaposition. What I'd like you to do is to choose one of these. I can give you the next slide as well if you want to choose this one or this one. Oops, sorry. Choose any thing, or even create your own technology and something, and explain the link between it. So see what you come up with. I'll give you 1 minute 10 seconds. Okay. Could we have one person giving me some ideas and to say which one you're talking about? Anybody?
Technology and freedom.
Okay.
Political freedom.
Sorry?
Political.
Political freedom. Well, we might not be talking about political freedom in IELTS, unfortunately. My students spend all their time talking about political freedom, but we have to try and steer away from that. Good topic, but I think we'd steer away from certain things in IELTS. But could you talk about it?
Technology and freedom, for example, you could show art on the internet,
Mm-hmm.
give information that people weren't already aware of in different areas,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Anything else?
Technology and games.
Could we stick with freedom for a second?
Lack of freedom.
Lack of freedom, yes. How technology controls our lives. But you see, the interesting thing is, somebody already gave the answer earlier, because technology and freedom to contact people, to communicate in different parts of the world. Everything is interrelated. We change the template, and then sometimes students, they don't know they know these things. I'm not saying that you're wrong what you're saying, but the ideas quite often have already been given in another class. Students, we recycle rubbish. Why not recycle ideas? Why not recycle templates? Why not recycle combinations? So you are right, but look at the other things that could. We've got communication. We've got the freedom for students at university to do research anywhere in the world. We don't have to. Myself, I do talks over the internet. I do talks like this to Switzerland using Skype. I teach my students via video conferencing, and I'm sitting in the video conferencing class asking students about communication, and I have to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze in order for them to say to me, "Oh, video conferencing, oh yeah." Why not get students to look around the room? Because in the room they've got mobiles. I did a class recently in medical communication, no material. Mobile, internet, and laptop, and the whole lesson was based on them creating their own material. 3 hours. And I would say, try and go into the classroom with one word. Don't go into the classroom burdened with books. I've written a lot of books, I shouldn't be saying this. Go in with mine, and Fiona's and Joe's. But that's not a good sales pitch. But I go into the classroom with one word like technology and teach for a couple of hours, teach writing. Because I say to students, okay, technology, I might do the exercises we've done. Create a question. What question do you want to do? Can we discuss and, okay, both opinions and both views and give your own opinion? Can we look at the causes of stress in the modern world where technology comes in? What solutions? Yes, they build the question. They can't come back and say to you, I don't want to do this because it's theirs. That's not your fault, that's their fault. And quite often they will say to you, as mine students often do, oh, I want to do this question, why? Because I don't like it. And I know if it comes up in the exam, I won't be able to deal with it. But if you say that, they'll say to you, oh, I don't like that, I don't know anything about it. So use them, ask the students. And you don't need more than 3 ideas, 4 ideas. Go for the simple and the familiar. I could teach for 3 hours using one of these words. I quite often do. Most of the time I go in, I might just take sport and say to them, let's write a question. Or I go in with nothing and they write it. And then we write in the air. It's quite interesting. You come up with a lot of ideas. You were writing in the air because you were speaking. Speaking is a good way of creating ideas before they write. This is brainstorming, but brainstorming in a slightly different way. It's using a trigger and something safe. And now we can think about questioning. I was going to put in here Socratic questioning, but Socratic questioning is maybe too related to conceptual thinking. But if I give you the word technology, could you create 3 or 4 questions related to technology that help students to trigger ideas? I'm not going to give you any more information. 1 minute. Okay, can we stop? Can anybody give me a few questions? Just a couple of questions?
What technology are you afraid of?
Yes, okay, that's a nice one, yes. Sorry? What technology are you afraid of? Yes? Is that wonder age related? I'm afraid of everything that's I've got. Are you a technophobe? That's you're a very good student. Very good vocabulary, yes.
What technology do your parents use?
Ah, very interesting. Moving away from, yes, moving away from the student, yes. Okay. Maybe I'm being told to move on. No. Okay.
If you could buy any piece of technology or gadget, what would you buy?
Yes, that brings in speaking and writing. Yes. So it doesn't have to be very sophisticated. Okay? Is technology effective? Is it detrimental? Is it practical? Is it useful? Is it important? I have great difficulty getting students to evaluate by saying technology is important because I think, wow, complex sentence here. The beginnings of. They've got the word important. I think, oh, give me another word for important, crucial, vital, essential. And then has a huge impact on, plays an enormous role in. And they can come up with these words once they've got something to trigger the idea. So you can use questions. What I've done is, there's something for you to take away, you can collect on the way out. It's a kind of short template. You can expand it yourselves, connect it with something that's coming up in a second, where you can use questions, the students can use questions to examine what they have, what they're about to write, or their ideas, but also for you as teachers to think about ways that you can bring in creativity into your methodology. Another way of doing it, give students a galaxy of words, different galaxies, get them to draw the lines between technology and entertainment, technology and transport, technology and education, technology and growth, technology and food. What I'd like you to do is to create some noun phrases, some concepts. I'm not going to give you any help with this. I just want to see what you do with it and see what you do when you're discussing. So you have to maybe combine just 2 of these, but maybe 2 or 3 of them to see if you can come up with a concept. And I'm only asking for maybe 1 or 2 because this may be more complex. I'll give you one to start off with to get you going. Food technology. Yes? So simple, but it doesn't have to be noun. It can be phrases. 1 minute to come up with 2 or 3. You can insert other words if you want. No, sorry. Yeah, I realize. Sorry. No. Yeah. Okay. Anybody give me one or two? I said you can insert other words. Anybody? Sorry? Technological growth. So you've changed the word technology into technological. Good.
Smart fridge.
Smart fridge. Which is an example of creative thinking and technology and food. Yes, good.
Speaking buses.
Sorry?
Speaking buses.
Speaking.
Well, the buses that tell you whether your next stop.
Ah, speaking buses. Oh, yes. Yes. Ah, okay. Yes. Okay. If you, yes, go on. Blended learning, which is perfect for this because it's blending ideas. Yes. Now, if you think about it, if I then say to you, put in the text features that we had at the beginning, I think it was around slide 10, where we had cause, effect, classification, etc. And if you think about that, we can have the types of technology in health, the role of technology in entertainment. Yes? The impact of technology on the world of entertainment. So you can start getting students to build very simple concepts. Concepts are more difficult to construct than simple words. And simple phrases like food technology, and you can keep going on with this concept. And this is a nice one, I think. Students have difficulty coming up with ideas that are perhaps outside themselves. And Fiona gave the idea of looking at, thinking of her father talking, and it is quite difficult for students to, if they haven't got world experience, to come up with ideas outside their immediate world. But if I'm just sticking with the word technology, but you see, we have technology, all students have technology. A recent survey on the BBC said a majority of students in this country have 5 different types of technology. That's quite amazing. And they're using them all the time. In my classes, sometimes students are using 2 or 3 bits of technology simultaneously. I allow them because they're interacting with me, and it is important for them to be able to do it. So somebody said a very nice thing. Who said about what technology do your parents have? And what technology are you afraid of? What technology are your parents afraid of? What technology are people over a certain age afraid of? And the thing is, you can start building this. The further you get away, you're going into maybe a bigger worldview. So personal, familial, social, local, regional, national, international. And that's quite a nice way to map a text, because students are being asked maybe to look at the social impact of technology, what is the effect of technology at a national level in their own countries, and do people use technology a lot? And they will know a lot of this. I started my teaching career in Sierra Leone, West Africa, a long time ago, 75, 77 as a volunteer. And there were no phones, or very few phones. I spoke to somebody from Sierra Leone relatively recently. Quantum leap, everybody's got mobile technology. No landlines, but they've got mobiles, and maybe 2 mobiles. And that is a fact of life now. So therefore, these things, they are there in the world around us. Students spend all their time looking at things online. We don't know what they're reading. and what they're looking at. So therefore, this is quite a useful thing. You can use this with any word. So we can look at things, students can create their own perspectives. I'm jumping because we're short of time, I think. Students can create their own perspective lists. Edward and I talked a lot about this. I pulled off, I think, a list of 3,500 words ending in AL: personal, familial, social, local. AL adjectives, creating perspectives. Cultural, traditional. When I get students to write an essay, if they're looking at an essay, I say to them, give me a list of 7 perspectives. And they just go straight along now. They have no problem. Environmental, local, national, regional, cultural, educational, environmental. Always the same. The world doesn't change. And then students can recycle these. They are now able to give me a whole list of ideas using these categories to help them. So we want to get these ideas triggered using different things. We can use functions, we can use nouns. I'm just going to jump on. And this takes us back to what I was doing in the beginning. At the risk of maybe boring you with the word technology, I'm just using it. But you see, what types? What are the effects? What was technology like 20 years ago? Well, it was in its infancy. What do you think of technology? It's useful, it's practical, it's harmful. Is technology available everywhere in the world? Is it available in every home? How does technology change things? And can you compare the effect of technology in education, blah, 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 or the use of technology, blah, blah, blah. These are back to so this is the structure. This is the structure that is in at the very beginning. And I think that getting students to think around structures like this, it helps them to feel safe with creating ideas and generating ideas, because if we just ask them, they're creating ideas in a vacuum. But if we give them templates or systems within which to work, we can hopefully help them. Now, I was going to ask you to do something with this, but I think we're running out of time. But I want to finish with this. When you've got students to write things, one way of getting them to look at what they've done is to map, maybe take a paragraph, not a whole essay, but take a paragraph and map it according to perspective. And it's quite interesting, after students have done, the perspectives quite often overlap, and they start coming out with these chains of information before they write, and then afterwards say, well, this is looking at the question from a cultural point of view. This is to do with financial. And they begin to see there's actually a very rich paragraph. And they think, oh yes, that's interesting, I can do this. And then get them to map the paragraph, the same paragraph, according to time. Are they talking about general truths? Are they talking about the past? Are they hedging? So you can get them talking about modality and reality. And then they can map a paragraph according to functions. Topic sentence, example, effect. It's quite interesting, when I was doing the IELTS skills app, I had a paragraph which was, after we'd done input, output, I wanted a summary, and it was nearly taken out, but I insisted it, and that went in. And what it was, the students have got a paragraph, and they're asked to read and think. We don't often do that with students. We don't want them thinking. We want them just doing what we tell them to do. Too dangerous. So they read and they're thinking. And if they can't get the hyperordinate meaning, they touch the screen and it says cause, effect, example, and it disappears. So they can read over this, and it gives them topic sentence. So they can actually see what flashes through the brain when it's a methodology of the brain when we're writing ideal paragraphs. And the beauty of that is that you can attach it to a laptop using an HDMI, and with your iPad show it on the screen for presentation purposes. And then you could actually, if you've got time, take a simple paragraph. I wouldn't do a whole essay, but a paragraph, one that one of the students has written themselves in groups, and ask them to rewrite the paragraph from a different perspective, or 2 or 3 different perspectives. That throws up a lot. And a very neat one, we could get them to paraphrase the text, and this is a very good redrafting technique. I'd imagine that your students are like mine. 250 words, stop. Are you finished? Yeah, I'm finished. Have you looked at it? Yeah. Is it correct? Yeah. And they haven't a clue what they've written. Get the class, don't even tell them you're doing this, get them to turn over the paper, ask them to write a summary in words or in noun phrases of what they have written. It'll be a challenge for them because they say that they know it, but they don't. They take a deep breath and cyanotically write what fill the page, and then say to them, okay, can you explain what is in your essay using the notes that you've created? And then get your partner to read your essay. And then you get them talking and they say, but you have just told a lie, because you said in your summary that you said this, but there's no example here. Oh, I forgot to put the example. Oh, let's redraft. I did that, took 2 hours. And they loved it, they were laughing, and they thought it was very funny. You see, IELTS can be fun. Thank you. I'm not sure if we have time for, it's up to you, but I have a taxi waiting, 8:30.
Perhaps we could take one question from the room, one from online, if we're very quick, and try and keep the questions very short, and answers likewise, if possible.
Yeah, and answers short.
Are there any questions from the room, very quickly? Any online? Okay, well...
Can I just say one more? You realise I've been talking about reading here, and speaking, and listening. It's transfer. And that is the part of the creativity. Now, there's a handout that you can take on the way out with a couple of template for ideas. Play around, challenge what I've said, and challenge yourselves. You see, the thing is, my students sit at different parts of the classroom, but the problem is, I'm always at the front. Are you always at the front? Do you walk around your students? Think about it.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Thank you. And we'll also distribute the handout online as well.
And if you want the PowerPoint, I think they're going to put that online.
Yeah, that's right.
By all means, take it and do what you want with it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you to Sam. And thank you, everybody who's joined online. We really welcome feedback. Tomorrow, people who are here, you'll receive, or in the next couple of days, you'll receive a link to feedback. So please do let us know what you thought and what you'd like in future, because it really helps us to decide what to do in future series. So thank you very much. And likewise for everybody online. Thank you very much for joining. Bye.